Braden, so I got to get your take on this. I noticed this, and I thought it was pretty funny. So no Gators on the Athlon first team All SEC. No issue there. But there is a former running back. His name is Trevor Etienne, first team All running back at Georgia. He's listed on the first team. Would he be first team if he was still in orange and blue?
So I didn't make that decision, but I don't know why the team would matter, honestly. Now, if you're projecting who makes first team, that's different. If we're saying like who we think is going to finish as a first team All SEC running back, then your situation and your surroundings absolutely take into account the fact that he's playing behind the best offensive line with maybe the number 1 overall pick at quarterback on the best coaching staff in America. Like, you have to eventually take that stuff into account. And it's not because of the brand or whatever. It's because if you play behind that offensive line with that quarterback, you're probably going to gain more yards and be more productive. So I think it's okay I don't have a problem with somebody saying, so-and-so is going to be better because they're going to be more productive because of X, Y, and Z. If you're saying in the preseason, who's the best running back in the conference, then I don't think it matters what team you're on. And if you're saying if the goal is to pick out the best running backs in America and put them first team All-America, second team, third team, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. A lot of times we're trying to project at the end of the season. And honestly, what's interesting about the SEC is the star power that we used to have in this conference, where we looked at like Todd Gurley's and we looked at Leonard Fournette's and we looked at like these like super elite star power players at running back. There aren't a lot of them this year. There's really good quarterbacks. There's a handful of really good receivers, but like really, and honestly, we don't have this on the defensive line either. You look at like Will Anderson's and Jadeveon Clowney's. There's no one like that in this conference. There will be at the end of the year. And so we don't know who those guys are. Is it Hunter at Auburn? I think Dylan Sampson's pretty solid at Tennessee. Like, there's guys that are going to break out and become stars. I think on paper, it's easy to say that Etienne is one of the best running backs, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the conference. And if you're going to say, I'm going to project forward and say who's got the best chance to be a first team all SEC player at the end of the year, it's obviously going to be a guy playing for Georgia versus Florida, but that's not a knock on. Does that make sense? Like, it's not a knock on Florida or Georgia. It's just sort of like a statement of reality. Like, if you play for Ohio State, you have a better chance of being an all-conference running back than if you play for Iowa. Like, that's just what it is.
Yeah, I just wondered if he was still a Gator, would he still be listed as the first team running back?
If you say who are the best 3 running backs in the conference.
Yeah.
If he was playing at Vanderbilt, I would say he's one of the best 3 running backs in the conference. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
And we've seen that in the past, with Vandy running backs. So, I mean, they've got their credit when it's due there. Kind of to extend that, SEC unit rankings for the Gators, they don't have a single position group better than 8th, and that's for the running back group. I was a bit surprised to see the quarterback room ranked 9th with the return of Mertz and DJ Lagway on the sideline. Texas A&M ranked right ahead of Florida. LSU 2 spots ahead at 7, which is where I'd probably have Florida. Mertz, Nussmeier, Lagway on the sideline as well.
Sure.
I think kind of like the grouping of the teams, I think you can shuffle and whatever rolls out Yahtzee style, you're fine with it. But I'd probably be a little higher on Mertz and Lagway combo if I'm looking at an entire quarterback room.
I'd be fine with that. I don't have any arguments there. I do think A&M is sneaky good, though, with, I think, Marcel Reed, who actually is from here in Nashville. I think Marcel Reed, there's a chance he wins that job some way at some point during the season. And so if you've got Wigman and Reed, I think there's an argument there you can make that they're better. But again, I have no problem with the Florida ranking there is completely tied to the quality in the conference.
Yeah.
That like, if you were to say who are the best 20 quarterbacks in America, like Graham Mertz is probably one of the top 20 quarterbacks in America, barely top 10 in the SEC. That's because you've got, with the names they've got here with Brady Cook and Carson Beck and Jackson Dart and Nico and like, it's just Jalen Milroe. Like, there's so many good quarterbacks. You
can easily list off 5 before you even get
Absolutely.
there.
So if you want to say they're 7th with the combo of Mertz and Lagway, I'm totally fine with that. Like, I don't have a problem with that at all. I would probably have LSU a touch lower as well. Again, these rankings are not mine. They're the magazines, they're the staffs. And so it's every one of these, the all conference, the rankings in the magazine and the unit rankings are largely done by a big group. And so we have to sort of put stuff down on paper. I would have probably A&M and Florida about even. I'm okay with LSU being behind them. And again, I would have no argument there. I think the offensive line almost could be a little bit better. I think they're ranked 10th in the conference.
Heavy transfer portal. Yeah. So
you just kind of don't know sometimes with the portal. Like Tennessee claimed a guy in the portal. Like, is he going to be good? Like, offensive line is so hard to predict. I think you can kind of look at a couple of teams and you know that Georgia's going to be good, that LSU is going to be good. But like even folks have questions about Alabama, and they're one of our best offensive lines in the country. So the offensive line, and I actually just did a long, not to promote myself again, but 440 Sports YouTube page, I did a long like 40-minute conversation with Cole Kubelik. Like, I think there's an offensive line problem in college football.
Oh, we discussed it here too.
And I think it's a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge problem. And I think it's happening on a developmental level at high schools. Like, NFL players are not getting developed along the offensive line. And certainly in college, they're suffering as well. And so I think offensive lines are just really, really hard to pinpoint. But I think Florida's could be slightly better, which means that the best part of their team, not that I need to tell Florida fans this, but the best part of their team is sort of up the middle on offense, in the backfield, in the quarterback's situation, in the offensive line. That's a good place to start if you're going to start the season.
Yeah, and also, I mean, of course, you guys got to hit deadlines. This was even before some of the tail end of the last transfer portal window. Florida brings in Elijah Badger from Arizona State, which should honestly really help that group.
Yeah.
So, that comes into play as well as far as timelines go.
Yes, and unfortunately, when you're working in print and not digital,
right.
you got to at some point send it literally out the door to the printer, and the printer has to put it all together, and there's like a 2-week turnaround there. And so it's always been that way. I think one time we had Everett Golson on the cover.
Oh, I remember that.
In a Notre Dame uniform.
Yeah.
And by the time the magazine came out, like, he was at Florida State, and we were like, oh man. And there's just some of those stuff you can't, like, we had Ole Miss and Baylor both ranked, I think, in the top 15. And I want to say the Hugh Freeze and the Art Briles scandals both happened at the same time. And so we were like, I guess we would have Baylor much lower and Ole Miss much lower. But like, you have to, you don't know that somebody's going to fall off a motorcycle in the middle of the summertime. Like, you don't know. So you have to. The portal has made it very, very hard. And here's the truth of the matter: it's not just us doing magazines,
right?
It's the coaches. Talking to these coaches, getting their scouting reports for all these other teams, which we do for every team in the magazine. We get them anonymously, but they give us real stuff about these teams. And these coaches used to tell us really interesting stuff about players, about scheme, about what they're doing with this particular unit group or whatever. And there's none of that anymore because they don't know. They don't know what a team is going to be in May or June. Even like all they're studying right now is like trends. Like, if I'm Billy Napier, I'm studying Miami's defensive trends. I'm studying Texas A&M's trends. They can't actually install any game plan right now. And not that you do that at this time of the year, but when fall camp comes around, you start installing stuff. You're not doing it for any one team because you have no clue what that team's going to be until that week arrives and you've actually seen them play games. So it's a really weird new part of the game. It's not just magazines and media and fans. These coaches know less about their opponents than ever before. And that's an interesting part of the game moving forward for sure.